process of the nonprofit. He drove to Spokane multiple times to help us get all the paperwork done. Since then, he has been instrumental with Veg Fest and other InVeg events. So Stephen has been a plant-powered for many years, and he is a wealth of knowledge on the subjects such as vegan health and nutrition. This is Stephen's second time presenting at our potluck. 3 years ago, Stephen gave a presentation on why humans need certain key nutrients such as vitamin B12 and why we as vegans get enough protein. Tonight, he's going to give us an insight into his world of caring for backyard bees. Now, would you please help me give Stephen a warm welcome?
Thank you, Josh. By the way, that's a great deal on the veggie burgers and hot dogs. They're usually a whole lot more at the store. They're among the best frankfurters and veggie burgers that I think that are out there, the vegan ones. So get them before they're gone. Thank you, Josh. Yes, it's been a real pleasure to have been part of helping InVeg in whichever way we can. We from Sanguine Vegetarians. And so a while ago, I was talking to Josh about bees, and he didn't know it. I was keeping bees. And then it transitioned onto how can a vegan keep bees and what's that all about? And so the story is, I'll get into it. And so ultimately it ended up with Josh asking me to give a presentation to InVeg about bees and whether honey is vegan and what is vegan beekeeping if such a thing exists. So the presentation I'm going to give today might not be exactly what you were expecting. It might not even be exactly what Josh was expecting. So stay tuned, but yes, I will talk about my adventures in beekeeping, but it'll go a bit beyond that. And some of this may actually also come to you as a bit of surprise, and perhaps there are parts of it that could be a bit disconcerting if you are an ethical vegan. So here we go. So back in college, I had a geology professor, a 70-year-old nun called Sister Margaret Van Kempen, and this was one of the quotes that she did in one of the classes. And she was this feisty old nun who would try to get this sort of joy of life into her students. And this quote from that time back in college stuck with me. And it is, if we did have a keen vision and feeling of all ordinary life, it would be like hearing the grass grow and the squirrel's heartbeat, and we die of the roar that lies on the other side of silence. I mean, there is so much in this universe that is on the other side of silence that we do not observe, that we're not cognizant of, and what's that like? And if we truly comprehended all the activity, even now in spring, the grass growing, the worms coming up, the creatures all awakening, the sap flowing, the flowers budding, all of that, if we truly comprehended it, what would it be like? And here we have, turn it on. This is a swarm from one of my hives. And to be inside the swarm is to be like inside a tornado. And this speaker isn't very loud, but inside the swarm is deafening. I tell you, it really is deafening. So that right there is where the queen has landed. Okay, so that's a swarm in progress where bees have split off from a colony to go found a new colony. So the old queen takes off and half the hive leaves with her to go start a new colony. And when they're swarming, those bees that are swarming are completely non-aggressive. So I was standing in the midst of that filming with just shorts and a t-shirt. It will land on me, and But to be inside that swarm is truly, it's just a remarkable experience. I don't know how many of you remember a scene from Fried Green Tomatoes where there's a scene, I don't know what her name is, but she's in by a log, and actually they filmed that during a swarm. But it's a really remarkable experience, and it's like being on the other side of that silence for once and hearing that roar. That's what it, and for me, perhaps more than anything, being inside a swarm has been one of the key amazing things about beekeeping. In fact, sometimes a swarm reminds me of the way a galaxy moves, and indeed, the micro perhaps mimics the macro or the other way around. It's really remarkable. So that's just a picture of a galaxy. And here's another video, and this is just, so this is one of my hives, and you know, a hive seems kind of quiet and doing its own thing, but if you put your ear up against the hive, you'll hear this sort of roar going on. And so I tried to capture a bit of that by looking inside the hive. Okay, let's see if we can hear the roar of the hive, which is their normal roar. Okay, so that was just a short clip, but it's amazing to watch them, and then to hear them, and to hear that roar and that activity inside the hive. It's a privilege, actually, to witness that. Okay, here's some honeybee trivia, which I'll try to go over quickly, just so you have some background. Again, a colony is comprised of a queen, one queen, a whole bunch of workers, and a few drones. And a colony, depending on the size, can have anywhere from 10 to 60,000 bees. And it's almost always dark inside a hive unless it's a hive that's out in the open. And so you have to think, how do they do everything in that darkness, right? And so they have to use senses in addition to sight. So there are very distinct roles for individual bees that transition through from their early, when they first emerged or hatched from their cell, go on from being a cleaner, a nurse bee, a construction worker, food preparation, guard bee, and then finally a forager. So a forager is toward the end of the life cycle of a worker bee. And the queen is mostly a puppet, despite what most people might think. The queen does not necessarily lead or form the hive. She's a puppet. She does what the hive organism or the hive mind does, which is all the workers. And a worker makes from anywhere from a foraging worker a 1/12 to half a teaspoon of honey in her lifetime. I mean, that's not very much at all. And just think, because really what they're collecting is nectar, which is about 1 part sugar to 4 parts water by volume. That's what nectar, that's about the concentration of sugar in nectar. So they have to condense that down to honey, which is really thick and is about 16-17% moisture. And so 50,000 miles to make 1 pound of honey. That's the distance of flying. So if you go to the store and see a 1 pound jar of honey, that represents the equivalent flying of bees twice around the planet. Bees are very mileage efficient. So one bee can, on 1 ounce of honey, can fly the 24,000 miles. They navigate using ultraviolet light. So even if it's a cloudy day, the ultraviolet light's still getting through those clouds. And there are guides, for example, on flowers to convey information that becomes visible under UV light. So if you shine UV light on flowers, you'll see all sorts of other features pop up that are there for the bees. So bees and flowers have this relationship that goes back 60 million years to the rise of angiosperms. And bees dance and pass chemicals to convey precise information. We could get into a lot of that, but we just don't have time. Over winter, despite many misconceptions people have, bees don't hibernate. What they do is cluster and try to stay warm to survive. So they're not really sleeping. In fact, activity goes on. They still try to maintain a small portion of the hive inside at that regular 94 degrees Fahrenheit, no matter what the conditions outside are. And the queen is still laying a few eggs and they're still raising a few bees, just to keep that hive tooling along. My beekeeping background, I've been keeping bees since 1999 in Western Washington. My grandfather used to keep bees. So it's been 17 years. And back then I was vegetarian, not vegan. If I was vegan, I probably wouldn't have kept bees. But it was like, oh, my grandfather kept bees, and it'd be nice to have our own honey, that sort of thing. So started keeping bees. And so I've learned a bunch of things about honeybees in these past 17 years. Their understanding or cognition of this world is just on a plane and on a level that's well beyond us. We understand the world in particular ways, but most of the animals of the world understand the world and relate with it in ways that we can't even begin to comprehend in many cases. And they form friendships. Many a summer evening, what will happen is the foragers will all come back to the hive. It's getting dusk time. And I'll see them on the landing board, just sort of milling around, sort of doing this, touching feelers with each other. And what are they doing? I mean, are they telling stories? Maybe they are. Hey, did you see that patch of flowers over there? Or, watch out, there's a spider on flower, blah, blah, blah. I don't know. Maybe they're talking about that, but they certainly seem to be talking. They work tirelessly to death. So over the winter, a worker bee can live up to be 6 months long. In the height of summer, 8 weeks tops for a worker, because they work so hard, they wear their wings out to death. Wear their wings out and then die. So they live lives of almost perfect selflessness. That is, they live for the sole benefit of the colony, of the hive, right? So for their community. And they live the Eden dictum almost perfectly. Now, what does that mean? This is something that I thought of long ago, and I still say, that if you look at sort of the biblical story of the Garden of Eden, and the injunction to live off the fruits and nuts of the trees, that was the diet that was recommended in Eden. So it was like, hey, you humans, I've created you, now go off and eat the nuts and fruits of the trees, and that's your food, and that's it. So in essence, that you don't destroy life. You don't even dig up roots or cut down plants. That you live just off what the trees are freely offering you. And indeed, bees do that better than just about any other organism on the planet, right? They live off what the flowers freely offer them. The flowers say, hey, come to me, because I want you, here's some nectar, and I want you to take some pollen, but then you go on another flower and pollinate that as well, right? So the bees are living a life where they don't destroy life in any way. They don't take any life. But if you consider even other herbivores, let's say a deer, right? And you say, well, a deer lives fairly benignly. Not quite so true. Deer can completely destroy certain areas of vegetation, denude the landscape, and so on. Now, bees are among those that don't take any life, yet they give life profusely, right, by their pollination. They are enabling life to thrive and to grow. So they're a huge, huge benefit. I mean, the only other creatures I can think of that kind of don't take life, yet give life, are creatures like termites, dung beetles. I can't think of too many that don't harm other beings or other plants even. But bees do it perfectly. So yeah, you can spend a lifetime studying bees and still not come close to knowing all that there is to know. So here's some bees on the front porch talking pretty much. They're guard bees, but they do this sort of thing where they kind of, put heads together and they're just, I don't know what they're doing, they're talking. And sometimes I pet them. I'm like, hey, you don't mind me. All right, I just wanted to show a clip from a documentary called More Than Honey. So this is a documentary by a German beekeeper, I think, or a German, Marcus Imhof. And it's a clip on, well, I'll play it. It's
blüht jetzt in den nächsten Stunden. Und jetzt wird sie hier bei der Blutfarbe am Honig festgeklebt und schauen, dass der Pilz unten dazukommt. Die Königin öffnet mal nur ein kleines bisschen den Zelldeckel, reicht den Rüssel heraus, lässt sich von den Bienen füttern, solange sie noch in der Zelle ist, und kommt dann schon praktisch gestärkt zur Welt.
So it's the queen going on a mating flight. There are a bunch of drones following after her.
Während der Begattung stirbt die Drohne.
The reason I just wanted to show that was it's an amazing piece of footage. I don't know if they made it up or if it was actually filmed, but it shows the drone going on a mating flight and the queen going on a mating flight, and the drones all in the early afternoon congregate in an area called the drone congregation area, hoping for a virgin queen to come to their congregation area so they can mate. And the queen will do that. Any virgin queen who emerges will go looking for a drone congregation area that's usually about 1,000 feet up in the air. And the queen can end up mating with 3-4 drones in one afternoon, and returns with her spermatheca, which is kind of a bag she has inside her filled with sperm, which she uses then for the rest of her life to fertilize eggs. But it's just, you know, the fact that the queen can find them, that there are these trails of pheromones in the air that the drones put down, that the queen follows, that all of this happens, it's just fascinating stuff to me. And that footage particularly was quite amazing. So there's wisdom from honeybees as well. There's something called the honeycomb conjecture by Thomas Ailes, PhD. He proved this a few years ago. And the conjecture is, given an area, how can you divide that area? What shape can you divide that area into to use the least amount of material, use as much of the area as possible, and still have those structures be strong enough? And it turns out it's the hex cell, the hexagonal honeycomb cells. That's the most efficient use of the given area to divide it into cells, if you will. Now, for a long time, people couldn't prove that. You know, you could use squares or triangles or something else, you know, or more complex shapes. But it turns out that hex cells are the absolute most efficient. And so this PhD mathematician finally proved it, like with, 8 pages of equations. But how do honeybees know that? How did they figure that out, right? So somewhere in their long evolutionary history, they figured it out. So instead of using squares or using triangles or something else, they figured out to use hex cells. There's what's known as the traveling salesperson problem. So if you have n number of points and you want to get to every point in the most efficient way, and just hit every point once, but you only want to do it once and you want to hit them in the most efficient way, what is the most efficient way to do that without just like going around in a circle or something, especially if they're not in a circle? And honeybees and other bees have figured out how to do that. They've solved that problem. Something that normally we could do with some very serious algorithms in a computer. The honeybees have the ability to reach decisions by consensus, so pretty much most everything that happens in a honeybee hive happens by consensus. So bees come to consensus on whether to swarm or not, whether to replace the queen or not, whether to raise drones or not, and how many. So they come to consensus on a lot of those things. They don't usually involve the queen in any of this, but the bees together come into consensus. When they're swarming, they come to consensus on which location to choose. So they send out scouts, and the scouts each evaluate different locations for a new home, but they use consensus to decide on which one they're actually going to end up in. So it's quite amazing. And they have an ability to respond collaboratively to a crisis. So I have a little story to tell. So when I was in Western Washington, we had hives, so this is some 12, 13 years ago.